Welcome, everybody. Happy, today, Wednesday? Happy Wednesday. Lindsey, are you ready? You excited? Can I have a blast here?
Ready. I've never been more excited. Super looking forward to talking through this, especially alongside you, Patrick. This is a really important topic. So looking forward to it.
Perfect. I like it. So we'll give a second before we get into any heavy details for people to join. I know what it's like to, webinars are fun. People like to learn, but I also get that sometimes they need some pressure alleviated. So who are we? Lindsey, introduce yourself to the crowd.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everybody. My name's Lindsey Norman. I'm the Director of Solutions and Capabilities at CatWorks, which is an Atlassian Platinum partner. I've been at CatWorks for a little bit over a year, but I've been in the Atlassian ecosystem going on about 10 years. With a major focus on enterprise portfolio management and all things that might consider. So data roll-up, how that might tie to financials, people, resource capacity, and all those good things. So great to be here alongside Patrick.
Yeah. Excellent. And I am Patrick. If you've joined any Tempo webinars in the past few months, you're probably tired of seeing my face. I'm on the solutions team at Tempo. I've been here about 2.5 years, but in the ecosystem as both a Jira admin and a customer and a person that nerds out on the community forums for about 8 or 9 years at this point. So, and the people in the crowd, welcome, and we're going to move on. So first poll question is going to come up with an art style. Now, if you read all of the notes about what we're doing here, you made this already, so you get a cheat sheet answer. But what is this art style called, right? Right now, we're zoomed in. Now we're zoomed out. And let's pop that up, see how many people know the answer here. The answer to this is pointillism. So I believe this example, I think Monet made it popular, but the concept is you've got a lot of tiny little dots that all mean something relevant when they're made on their own, but really where they add value is when you put together in one much larger picture. And that zooming in, the zooming out, the various layers of how it's built out is where we like to think of successful portfolio management. You want, when you zoom out, to get a picture that makes sense. You don't want to have a picture that looks like everybody thinks they're working on the top priority and they've all built machinations of the same thing instead of a cohesive product or footprint of work that's been developed at the end. So, Lindsey, you and I were kind of nerding out on this topic at Tempo's RKO earlier this year. That was kind of the catalyst for the conversation. And I just want to get your initial thoughts on what does it mean to have a good lens of zooming in and out on a portfolio?
Yeah, thanks for that. So to us, this means two things in tandem, right? Number one is the platform and the tools that you use. So having the right functionality in the tools, having the right data capability and data modeling structures that are natively available. So that's number one. But number two, and I would say maybe more importantly sometimes than number one, is having the right people and process structures within the organization. Many times this has to do with sources of truth for data, not just in your systems, but what people, what teams, what roles are accountable for that level of data. To simplify it, we're talking something like team level to department level to enterprise level, right? It's one thing to have a platform that can do that, but if that's disorganized at the people and process level, that also has to be adjusted or the platform won't fix that, right? So those are the two lenses.
And then you just install stuff and problems go away. I thought was the...
Yeah, just install a platform. Yeah. Yeah.
I like it. So let's dig a little deeper on that. Let's talk through our agenda here. So actually, I want to let you talk through the agenda here because when we came up with this jointly, for some context for everybody in the call, that if anybody doesn't have a good understanding of who CatWorks is and who Tempo is, right? As Lindsey introduced, CatWorks is a solution partner. Tempo is a software provider, right? So we make what I will admittedly say is amazing software, but I'm biased. I work here, right? Now, I was a Tempo customer before I worked at Tempo, so the bias came with some proof points there. But, getting a true measure of your portfolio is not plug and play, right? The software and the tooling and aspects of it can get you as close as they can to make it as easy as to be onboarded. But really, when you've got thoughtful conversations around what people are working with, what other people, that's first, right? The software enables those conversations and enables that delivery. So through that lens and kind of this agenda we came up with, Lindsey. Let's give it a run through.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this agenda, the lens is exactly as Patrick has described. So the goal is to work through, always as a solution partner, we're working through what software vendors, what platforms really meet the cut. And as somebody who doesn't work at Tempo, I'm quite biased to what Tempo has created here. I think that the products, the platform has all the bells and whistles that are needed. What's next is essentially this agenda that we're working through, and this is the people, process, and unique configuration of those platforms, which is something that Atlassian, CatWorks as an Atlassian partner can help with. So starting at the top of what outcomes are you driving towards? This is really key. We'll get into this in detail, but the understanding of portfolio management really at the top is what is your portfolio? What's your kind of major initiatives as a company, whatever you might name these. We hear different names all the time, but they typically mean the same thing. What are you all trying to accomplish over a significant span of time? Think something like a year, 2 years, 3 years. These are broader plans. Think that zoom out, right? That the zoom out of the picture that Patrick has showed. Going into number 2, what is that data driving that measurement? Very often organizations, and we totally get this, will say like we need people, processes, and platforms that drive completion of our key initiatives. That's all great, but how do we know what is the core measurement of knowing what complete is? Of course, like an initiative being marked as done is one thing, but there are usually different phases of done in a longer plan, right? Sure. Different value that's driven iteratively, and that's what we're pushing organizations for always. And identifying what those metrics really are, so it's not ambiguous, right? So it's
not just how many heads have been painted in the context of the broader painting, right? It's you really want the whole thing.
True measurement, true objective measurement. Think back to, if anybody on the call is familiar, but think like Lean Six Sigma type, like really pushing for metrics, pushing for measurement, and what does that mean objectively, not subjectively? Number 3, where is this data? And there's that parentheses if Excel doesn't count. And so where this data lies is crazy important, and where it doesn't lie is also important, right? So the nature of the source of truth and then the integration. The one that really sticks out here as just an example to bring this to earth is if you've got all of your operational work happening in Atlassian, let's say Jira, but all your finances are in an Excel sheet somewhere, or maybe in an ERP system. If these two things are not connected, it's very difficult to identify what that true spend may look like, how you're really tracking towards a budget. Just one example. But down the line to 4, kind of already hit this, but where should it be? So if you've identified where it is and that's not ideal, now where does it belong? The goal as we see it, or just kind of the CatWorks philosophy, if you will, is that Atlassian and its counterparts, so like Tempo, Atlassian and the marketplace, is part of a greater whole for most enterprises. There are other platforms at play, and other platforms that do very well, CRM systems and ERP systems and things that the Atlassian eco doesn't have. The goal is not to bring all of that data as Atlassian as the source of truth, but to integrate Atlassian so you don't have duplication. This brings us to number 5. Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
Well, we can dig deeper on this on number 4, but I also see a lot of enterprise organizations strategically deciding not to commit to one platform. Right. So even if there's, cool. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I know you and I could talk about. We'll end up doing the whole presentation reviewing the agenda, so I'll try to it out. But exactly what Patrick said is that we understand, support, and recommend, frankly, especially in certain cases, that you have a robust variation in your technical stack, right? So that is encouraged. That brings us to 5 of now, how does this data talk? Integration is highly possible with the Atlassian ecosystem, both with the Atlassian core products and Tempo's products. One of the reasons why we as a partner love Tempo is due to them not only having these portfolio apps, but also apps that facilitate integration. So Tempo has products that integrate into Power BI, Tableau, Salesforce. I could go down the line of different integration capabilities that Tempo has. So this, they really get it. And they allow the technology for us as partners to service our clients with. And then finally 6, which is probably the most near and dear to my heart because it's the hardest, is how do we get people to do the things? So how do we it's one thing to set up a platform. It's another thing to have an entire new way of working through a large enterprise. We hope, as partners and always partnering with Tempo as well, to make sure that the platform is not the hardest part of that it's, really focusing on good business processes, and the platform is the easier part because it works well, right? That's the idea. So, no pressure, Patrick, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Now that was years later, we can go back to
we did it.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll stop sharing the slide here because now we're just going to talk about this stuff. So when it comes to defining outcomes that you're driving towards, so one of the things I can talk a bit about where the visibility is exposed inside of Tempo to show how you're progressing. But before that ever happens, you need to know what's important as an organization. And to your 1 and 2 is a lot of overlap, right? What are we trying to achieve and how do we measure success? So how at CatWorks do you help organizations define that? And 2, what are a couple tips you can give for people on the call today that could get them started down the right path?
So a couple things that we could recommend that really help get started on the right path is, as hard as it is getting the visibility and the understanding of what your senior leadership is looking for. So often, and of course, there's all sorts of people that might roles that might be on a webinar like this, but more often than not, we are working with somebody that sits in the middle of senior leadership and the execution teams. It's often maybe a little bit easier to get the information from the execution teams. And what we see is a lot of guessing, maybe very good educated guessing, but guessing on the measurements and the metrics that leadership is looking for. It may be very difficult. We often see it might be difficult to, get that time, gain that understanding. That's something that CatWorks often will help with, is really be that bridge to senior leadership, to that executive level. Getting that clarity on what metrics matter to them and which don't often can be quite surprising to the execution teams into the middle layer. So I would recommend that first and foremost, that if you're going to get very serious about a portfolio tool, that you have that perspective involved. Yes.
I like it. I have an example I used literally this week in that regard with something I'm helping the Tempo executive team out with. So I was building an executive dashboard for a customer, and I was like, hey, we have execs here. I bet they know more about this than I do. So I actually fed in some information around structure and custom charts, which is where we're planning to build it. Did some mock-ups before I even built it in our own software. I just had AI kick out some images and say, hey, are these, prompting around questions around alignment and strategic drift, all the aspects that fit into what I was expecting, but then providing feedback to leadership to say, does this look good? If not, where am I wrong? And you can draw out a lot of questions and responses that way to improve the flow. And then you can start that conversation.
That's right. Yep, exactly. One last one, but I'd say, well, there's many, but I'd say beyond, because it's maybe not always amazing advice to say, go talk to your leadership, right? Like that can feel like a little maybe we've tried that. But something that maybe is a little bit more actionable and tangible is that really looking at a body of a portfolio in 3 lenses. Okay, so you've got your work, you've got your people, and you've got your money, right? And so having that understanding of those 3 streams interacting with one another. Atlassian, so Jira Software, good old Jira Software, does an amazing job of granular, the points and the pointillism, granular work management, right? That's been the bread and butter of this platform. When it comes to taking that up another notch, or several notches, frankly, whether it's project, program, portfolio, that's where products like Tempo really help. So that's the work part, right? We then flip over to the people part, which again, calling out Tempo for resource and capacity management capabilities. If I can't say so, as a third party, as a non-Tempo employee, I can say that Eco, Tempo has been viewed for years as the choice for resource and capacity management. So as Tempo expands their capability in portfolio, that's where a lot of that bias and trust is coming from, because portfolio only through the lens of work and not through the lens of the people is it's missing a huge piece. And that brings me third to the financial part. Very often the financial part is the hardest for the groups that we're working with to control. You have, a CFO, you have a financial organization, they choose their tools, and of course they do. But at least having an understanding of how funding is done, and how that funding can be tied to actual execution. So it's really those three streams. If you're thinking about this initiative in three solid categories, you're onto a good start.
I'd really, that third one, the how is work funded, is very misunderstood because it's very complicated, right? And getting an understanding internally of how that's done. Like, is it value stream funding? We've got a body of people, and what can they do? Or is it project-based funding? And we have something we want to do? Who do we need to hire? Like, most organizations have a combination of how that takes place, and getting that, I imagine that's something you can help with. But getting that deep understanding, right?
Yeah. That is one of our core, I'd say as of late, probably the last couple of years. That is one of the biggest asks from clients of all sizes. And the larger the client, the more difficult it is, really. What we advocate for, just to make sure it's extra clear, is in no way do we say take your finance. Now, there are absolutely ways to take financials into the Atlassian eco, and Tempo has products for that. But we're big fans of not only meeting clients where they are, but meeting our direct stakeholders with what they can control. So if you're in an organization that has an ERP system that has financial tools, and you want to stick with those, now let's talk about integration. It does not need to be so binary, right? As like either get it in the Atlassian system or get it out. Talk about integration. So many clients that we work with, we're working with stakeholders that are accountable to adhere to a budget without a full understanding of maybe even how much we've burned down on that budget. And if it is going over budget without enough data, objective, measurable evidence, frankly, to go advocate for more budget, right? So making sure that these conversations are truly objective in the organization is really something that we work with as a partner with the platforms that are available to us.
I like that. That's in a prior life, I was an IT director, and I remember just the struggles of validating a need to either hire more people or do more product investment when it came to the effort it took to support certain product lines, and providing proof points of here's how much effort, we were using timesheets for this. So here's how much effort it's taking broken down by product category. And now that was all, the relevance there was it was tied to revenue as well. So one of the decisions that we were able to make as a result of what you're talking about is we actually ended up firing one customer, like not a person. We fired a customer because we realized like we were not making money on them because the level of, it wasn't the best product market fit in the end as they matured and we matured, but having all that information together allows for very strategic decisions that you're not able to make when you're only on the zoom in. Like when you take that zoom out and take the broader picture, it's bigger than Jira, it's bigger than the ARP, right?
Yeah, it's about data. And I think over the last few years, the willingness for leadership at, again, organizations of all sizes, the willingness of leadership to really start talking about good data has really increased. The AI boom, the understanding of, I think just the understanding in general, of course, working with, whether it's like a tech company or maybe a more modern, hate to say it that way, but forward company, they might have been having these conversations, but I'm seeing this understanding across the industry vertical board, even with industries that are not technical, right? So really having that understanding of how important data is, and not just data volume, but data quality. That decisions being made over who is the loudest in the room, who maybe has been at the organization the longest. I'm not going to be delusional to tell you that these platforms will solve all of that for you. But our goal is to maybe make that harder, right? Like to make data speak for itself, right? To give you leverage with real facts. Yeah.
That's a good, perfect segue into where is the data? Excel doesn't count. And where should it be, right? Where is it the stickiest? So what does it look like for you to go through the discovery phase with a customer or a prospect and validate what's important, right? So we've determined what outcomes we're driving towards, and we've determined how that should be measured. So now how do we go in to say, all right, where is it now? Where do we need to move it to? And what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So typically at that point, we would enter I would say like a discovery/assessment phase, right? So there might be an understanding that, okay, we have a bunch of, let's say, financial data sitting in a combination of Excel and Jira software, and we want to get that out. So we might take a look at that and do a platform analysis to say, okay, here's where some of that data lies. Here's the scope of the data, and not just the data, but the processes that need to follow, that we recommend you move out to either a Tempo product that's doing financials, or B, an existing ERP product. Mm-hmm. Where we see this the most, right, is that you may have a financial organization that's doing a lot of budgeting over here, again, in Excel, ERP, and then you've got project managers kind of guessing funding in the system instead of a source of truth, right? So that sort of identification is really important. Beyond that, one of the biggest things that we see as well is your work management. So your work data may appropriately lie in Jira, but just because it's there doesn't mean it's there in the best way for you. So you may have 20 plus, and I'm just using a number. We've seen way more, way less, but let's just use 20 teams, okay? And you've got 20 software engineering teams, or maybe that's a mix of marketing and legal and product teams and what have you. And one of the amazing things about Jira or Atlassian in general is that you can bend it to your organization's needs, but that can also be one of the worst things. Because if you've got sets of teams that are all supposed to be operating in unison, but they're all operating in their own special flavor of way of doing things, that's where a platform analysis and assessment with very key recommendations on not just what application the data resides in, but how it resides, what fields are important. A big thing that we try to identify during these assessments that we can only do by talking to people, there's no system analysis that's going to help us with this, is really getting an understanding of, we mentioned the metrics and the data that's important. The reason we do that, it's not just for leadership. I think there was a phrase that we hear a lot from Tempo of like the squishy middle or the middle ground, right? And the reason I bring that up is it's one thing to understand metrics that leadership needs, but we also need to design processes that are realistic for the individual contributor, right? So if you come in there and you create a mechanism in Atlassian where your individual contributors have to fill out 50 custom fields to even, tell you the work that they're working on, that's a great way to get people to disengage. And so it's not just about understanding what leadership needs, but it's also understanding what is realistic for the IC. The analogy that I'll use sometimes with our clients is that your C-level may be the brain, okay? And again, all jokes aside, because we hear different reactions that way. Your C-level may be, think of your organization as a body, and your C-level is the brain, okay? The brain can control a whole lot of things, but if you break your foot, there's no amount of thinking or willing from your brain that is going to help that, okay? So there's not everything that can be controlled through required fields, mandatory, doing those things. Think of people and data like water. If there's a crack, they will find it. Okay. So that's how you get people to have their own downloads of Monday.com on the side, or their Excel sheets that they use. And so these are the things that at scale, it's not just about leadership measurement. It's also about what is actually realistic and feasible for your organization. And the only way that we can do that is by understanding you all at multiple levels.
I think when we were chatting about the idea that led to this, you said something to the effect of, now this is oversimplifying things, but you're like, just give me 6 fields. Like, if you can give me these 6 fields that you can agree upon within an organization, you can make some real progress. So as an actionable thing for people to be thinking about, what are if somebody had 6 fields to say, all right, is this normalized? What would some of those fields be, just to start to speak the same language across different departments, different layers of the portfolio?
Yep. And admittedly, these fields may or may not sound silly. They're going to seem obvious. But at scale, we see so much I would say, to say it bluntly, mismanagement of these types of fields in their core, right? So start date and due date. There's your first two out of six. And I know that sounds silly, but truly, we see organizations that have, I've seen a client with 80 plus fields for start date, and I'm not kidding. Really, all phrased a different way. Capital F, first. Do all of these things, and be a very large organization, right? And all jokes aside, people are signing into work to do their best. So if they're not aware that a field exists, and if there's not governance for the platform that you're administrating, and that's how that happens, right? And so it's well-meaning.
Series of decisions that made sense to whoever made them at the time. And
Yep. People wholly are not irrational. The years in this industry that I've seen, a lot of irrational decisions can be made with a lot of rational thought behind them. So it's not on the individual. So start date, due date. And not just having those fields, but having those fields in a way that is realistic at scale. So meaning if you've got a work breakdown tree, initiative, feature, epic, story, do what you can in your platform to automate those start dates and due dates based on how things are scheduled, right? And that's what platforms can help. So it's not about getting 20,000 people to enter start date, due date till they die, right? It's about having that set up in a way that is feasible and scalable. As for larger companies. So that's the first two. Sounds easy, but not easy. And sorry if I'm breaking up a bit. I hope my Wi-Fi stabilizes.
No, you're coming loud and clear. You good?
Okay, good. And so those are two. The third one I would say is it is a field in the system, but really a connection to a larger initiative. So meaning if you have a task or a story, whatever that individual record is, that should tie up to something larger, to something larger, to something larger. So making sure that line of data, that breadcrumb is very, very clear, and not just clear to leadership, but clear to the people doing the work. What we find is the more clarity an individual has to how the work that they're doing rolls up to an initiative or an OKR or what have you, the better quality work and the better quality understanding you're going to get out of your teams. So whether that's a parent field in Jira for any of my Jira nerds, or whether that's an OKR module that you're linking OKRs to work, making sure that single tasks are not viewed as single tasks, right? Right. Viewed as part of that greater. So that takes us three. Assignments. So it's one thing to assign it to a user. It's a whole nother thing to assign it to either a function, a department, to really show that accountability within the organization. Jira on its own does a great job of individual assignment, right? Of individual work management. But if you are a CIO, if you are a director, if you are a large organization, seeing that John Smith is working on story A is not going to help you a whole lot. But really understanding the assignment of an ownership through the act of either maybe a department lead. And again, this all builds on each other if you can't tell. So it's you first need that assignment to the greater work, and then you see that assignment of ownership. Or whether that's through assignment through some of Tempo's products, like the resource capacity manager team modules, having that rope into structure, right? So there are many ways to do fields like this, but really true assignment, not just by name, but
by ownership.
That's what this is all about. And so where are we? We've got start date, due date, work tree, people assignment. The fourth thing is, and this one's hard, but any connection to funding. And again, these are all fields. I know it seems like simple fields, but these would be connections. So whether that's, I don't know, I could go on so many solutions here, but some sort of a connection either to, even if it's, I hate to say it, but an Excel document, something that you're saying, okay, here's how this is funded, right? And here's a body of work, here's where it's coming from, it's approved, it's funded. That type of field is necessary. And then always effort size. Some of your standard stuff, but size of effort, right? Is this whether you do story pointing or you do it in time or you do it in t-shirt sizing, what have you, but where does this lie? And then very lastly, I would say priority. So again, any Jira nerds here, you have a priority field that's native, but we need more than that at this point. So again, alignment to OKRs initiatives. Like if you have, for one client in particular, and I really, really enjoyed this implementation. This was a few years back. We had a client who did very intense prioritization. They actually had very good, so we helped them get very good kind of C-level co-prioritization. So think like CFO has priorities, marketing, sales, but they all need to figure out what's number one, because you can't hand engineering 3 number one priorities, right?
Right.
So speaking fields for this, right? What we did for them was they had the prioritization at the initiative level, and we created automations to ensure that if a story was through all those lineages tied to an initiative, you would know the priority of that initiative, like at the story level, right? So having like, this is tied to, it was like a field, this is tied to priority 4, this is tied to priority 1. This allows teams to prioritize in alignment with leadership without having to ask, without having to verify, without having to, they're looking at their data saying, I have 10 stories, 2 of these are P1, 3 of these are P2, like that type of level. So hopefully that was synced, but those are like the 6 core fields, right? That we would talk through. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you. I'm going to showcase something in structure that kind of aligns with what we're talking about on the zoom in and zoom out and all those various fields coming into play. So, because it's really relevant here. So you'd mentioned, all right, if I've got bodies of work across different work structure hierarchies, maybe big organization, I've got agile delivery teams, but the PMO has a lot of stage gating required. So I've got traditional project management phases that are happening above the work management layer. So if I'm looking at that zoom in, that zoom out, right, where the work, so what triggered this for me was your reference of, if you think of the C-suite as the brain and the foot breaks, there's no amount of thinking that can fix the foot, right? And that's process, that's people, but it's also visibility and transparency. So if I've got an agentic customer experience as an overall initiative that I'm driving towards for my customers, and right now it's not at risk, right? Now at the executive level, this is great. I don't need to see anything further. Now at the program level, and I'm working on the model research and development, I can see that there is some risk for one of my epics. It's not big enough that it's throwing my whole initiative off, but contextually, I care about this. And the risk could be because of the delivery. It could be because, you can see here, I've been looking at it by tempo team. There's no team assigned. There's no ownership here, right? That's going to inherently put me at risk. Who's tracking this? Who's working on it? Like that governance, that data clarity is important. And from an exec, again, I don't care what's happening at the team level, but at that squishy middle layer, that really matters. Like my job is to find those blockers and help people unblock them. Now, let's say like we're further down and I'm a project manager that's working on the scope of this, and that this will be sort of the really zoomed in piece, right? As a project manager, when I'm looking at my Gantt delivery timeline view here, and I see that I have some post-deployment work that is scheduled in the time box of my deployment work. I, as a human, as a project manager, like, that's not a great idea. We're going to run into some trouble there. So whether I'm doing it like in the structure or whether I'm doing it inside Jira by creating a link, I'm making my decision as a person to say, all right, this is not good. We need to fix this. We have a dependency here. And now I'm exposing risk at the low level. But as we zoom back out, up at the leadership layer, I now see risk to my agentic customer experience. Now I care. Now I know I need to start talking to somebody in the PMO, somebody in the engineering leadership, just to go and drill down and find out where that's coming from. So we're not failing on any deliveries we've made for shareholders or customers or other stakeholders. So from your context, Lindsey, when we talk about those 6 fields and kind of we were talking, this is heavily in that, where does the data live and where should it be? What do you see in organizations that make mistakes here, that when you're coming in, like, we need these 6 fields, right? What are some common pitfalls you see that lead to either something like this exposing problems, or needing a way to have them exposable? Because if the governance is all over the place, right, you got to get that cleaned up first.
Yeah. So one of the pitfalls that we see here is without an initiative, like a true enterprise-wide kind of, we're going to consolidate this initiative, you will have so many cooks in the kitchen about opinions, right? And so all those opinions should be taken into account to some degree, because it highlights whenever a team is coming in strongly saying, I need this field, I need this data, this isn't going to work for me. That's almost always coming from a place somewhere behind that. They've been asked for certain information by their boss's boss, and they weren't able to deliver it, right? And so we need to get to the root of what that is. But one of the pitfalls we see is that if there is not clarity on either, directive of like, yes, we're doing this, we're moving towards consolidation, and clarity on the metrics that we mentioned that leadership's looking for, if these initiatives are completely handled by, I would say, the team and product level or program level, we end up with overcomplicated systems.
Makes sense.
That's one of the biggest pitfalls, and it is difficult to do. Like, I don't want to gloss over how difficult it can be to really get that like full leadership and organizational alignment, but it really for things at the scale can be quite necessary. So that's one. Another pitfall that we see is a desire for more information. To the greater the data, the more security somebody feels. Okay, so just because you have more data doesn't mean you know more. Okay, so I think like leaning towards like, we need to know everything, and it all needs to be at the story level. Sometimes hundreds of fields. I've seen all these tabs. Information doesn't always mean more power. Greater information, if that information is not organized, if that information is not entered appropriately. We talked about if you're expecting thousands of people to fill out just pages of fields, it's a great way to get bad quality data. So I'd say that's another really big pitfall, is that there's this idea of just like, I need to know everything, where what typically the root behind that is that maybe there's two parts of the organization that aren't working well together. So it's like, you have one part. We see this sometime, not to call out any, certainly not any org in particular, but I'll see this very often between maybe marketing and software engineering. Okay. Right. And so marketing's got its initiatives. Marketing is obviously deeply embedded in software at this point. I mean, in 2026, right? So marketing's got its plans, and they've got all their marketing skill. They know they know, they're seeing the signals. They know what's important. They're driving priorities. But maybe they're not feeling that software engineering understands those priorities. And that may be because software engineering is getting hammered by the CISO or the CFO for something really, really important, right? So they're over here having to play kind of field cop, and the overcorrection of marketing to say, well, now I need to know everything. Marketing turns into a project manager for software engineering. They start asking for data, right? That a project manager would ask for, or like, instead of just being like, where's my stuff at? It's like, I need to know everything. I need to know the roadmap. We see that as an overcorrection of a problem where the root cause is unclear priorities at the C level that's being overcorrected by an ask of more data for marketing. So that's a very common. Yeah.
That's one question I see coming up, or one question that I ask a lot of customers or prospects as we're doing discovery. I'll give a very tactical user example here that gets into asking for too much data of a person and like not letting them do their job, right? Like let them do the work, let them build the thing. And where it often comes in is, I see it if we're doing something like a legacy PPM displacement or something along those lines. Somebody's decided, hey, this is too expensive. We're not getting enough value out of it. Jira's already really sticky. Like, everybody's already there. How can we do our program and portfolio management inside of Jira? And they'll have questions around capturing work classifications and people putting things in buckets of like design, build, etc., because that's what they're used to doing, because that's what they had to do. And sometimes the requirement requests will come in with a lot of fields that a user needs to fill out. And so we start asking, like, why are we asking for this? What decision will be made from filling this out? And often it's like, it's where it came from. That's what people are used to. Or to your point earlier, it's like, it's a lot of decisions that got pushed down from different branches of the organization, setting competing priorities. So, exactly. What is the least amount of information we can ask an individual for? And what can we do in the background by inferring what they spent their time on based on their calendar, or having a robo agent auto-populate the CapEx, OpEx classification because we detected this epic says it's for training, even though it's under a capitalizable initiative. Like all that stuff can come into play to make things better without a lot more effort at the individual level.
That's right. That's right. And I think just to, in closing on that topic, one of the bigger things that's really difficult for an organization, for the folks within it, because you're so close to it, which I had mentioned in the beginning, being in the ecosystem for about 11 years, half of that was as a client. So have that perspective, at least half of my career of being the platform owner, the admin, the on the client side, working with partners, working with vendors, right? And kind of understanding those perspectives. Something that at least I experienced and that I see with a lot of our clients is this idea that you may feel that you see kind of the maybe lack of ownership or the misplaced priorities or the misplaced accountability. But the data sprawl is so severe, and you are sitting in the middle of leadership screaming that their stuff's not done, and people doing the work saying we're trying as hard as we can. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough funding. We don't have enough and so you are sitting in the middle of that. What can be very helpful is a fresh perspective. What I will see is I'll say is I've been on both sides of this where, if you bring in a vendor, whether it's a Tempo perspective or an Atlassian partner perspective, you bring them in and maybe they say things that you've been saying for a while. Sometimes organizations just need to hear it from somebody that's outside. And so I've experienced that myself, and then I've experienced it on the other side with our clients. So yes.
I like it. That makes sense. Okay. So I have a poll question that I'm going to pop up. And then after that, we'll get into the last two topics here, which is how does the data talk? And what's the other one? How do we get the people to do the things, right? So if we could pop our poll, let me share my screen here, and then we'll pop a poll question. The poll's here. There we go. I don't need to share it. So we always want to make sure we pop this before the end of the call, before people are starting to drop off, get ready for the next meeting. So what would be the most helpful for attendees after today, right? These are some potential follow-up actions of conversations that help you get to that next step of portfolio maturity, or potentially with enabling any of the solutions that we've been talking about there. So I will just leave that poll question up, and then Shania, if you would be so kind, whenever it's all answered, you can close that out. I'm just going to pretend it's not there, and Lindsey and I will keep talking. So Lindsey, the next question then is, or the next topic is, how does the data talk? And I know Tempo and CatWorks did a roadshow a couple months ago recently where you guys had this amazing kind of visualization of what a real organization looks like. So would you mind sharing that and kind of talking through it?
Absolutely. So I've got it here, and let me just share my screen. 1 second. Go. All right. Are we all looking at something that says?
Using.
Yeah. Good. So I'll zoom in. Oops. I'll zoom on in, and I dismiss some of these notifications. Okay. So sorry, we're a team shop, and so some of this is a little foreign. But with that, okay, what you're looking at, and I'm going to try not to give everybody vertigo in the process, but what you're looking at is an interactive diagram, what CatWorks deems as enterprise platform intelligence. So you'll notice that, and this is the exact diagram that we did on the roadshow. So you will notice here that there are several Tempo products as well as Atlassian core products, okay? And the goal of this, and the drag and drop's not working today, of course, so just bear with me as I zoom in and out. But the goal of this is to work towards what a true integrated enterprise might look like, right? So of course, there are more applications than I'm showing here that might be in your ecosystem, but we kind of pick the heavy hitters that we hear a lot. So looking at Jira software in particular, there we go. Let's see if this is... all right. So we're looking here at some of these platforms, right? And so if I look at Jira software, you can see some of the ways that we see this integrate with our clients. Okay. So you're seeing this go into financial management tools. You see structure here. you may be on the strategy collection, right? So you might be connecting in there. And we have lots of clients that may be using something for a portfolio, but are still really embedded with some of Tempo's core tools when it comes to resource and capacity management. So you can see that right here, capacity planner. So right there, yep. So we've got the Tempo timesheets. We talk about integrations. Where you see any orange dotted lines like this, these are Tempo facilitated integrations. Okay, so having data from Tempo timesheets go into your BI systems or go into your ERP systems, whatever that might be. You see some of those ERP systems down here. So we see Capacity Planner. We've have deep experience having clients integrate that into ERP, integrate that into BI, integrate that into portfolio, what have you, right? So making sure that that data is really moving. This type of diagram also shows what application this is often the source of truth for. So if you look at Tempo Capacity Planner here, you can see on the right side panel, source of truth for capacity allocation, profiles, leave and public holidays. If you go over here to Jira Software, or not, because there it goes. So the source of truth for epic stories tasks. So we talked a little bit earlier in the beginning of the webinar around thinking about things in streams of people, work, and time. Jira Software is your work. The Tempo product I just showed would be your time and your people, right? The other side of this is your financials. And so Tempo has products within that financial realm, and we've implemented those for clients before. But like I've said a few times, we also know that there are longstanding financial applications at your ecosystem, and we're well versed at integrating those too. So lastly, with this diagram, to kind of leave you with some of this, beyond just integrating data, we also classify these platforms as a whole really in 4 categories. And I'm sure I could come up with a million in between, but these are kind of your 4 core, right? So you have your data platforms. This is going to be your databases. You've got, Databricks, Snowflake, Atlassian Analytics. I could go on these. This is where your data is truly stored. This may generate topics of data residency and all these other things that we could talk about outside of portfolio, but it's really important. We then have your operational systems. This is what I would classify a good set of the Tempo products as well as a good set of the core Atlassian products as well. So your Jira Software, JSM, things like that. We'd also put DevOps in there too. I mean, at the risk of talking about the entire ecosystem in 5 minutes, right? Like, of course, this focus is portfolio. But yeah, we have. Just talk faster. We then have your business systems. This is going to be your ERP, CRM, all those types of systems that really facilitate more the business side of things. But every business this day and age is technical, right? And so I think that's been the big change. And then lastly, which is going to be hard to see, lastly, my favorite layer personally is your decision layer, right? So this is going to be your portfolio tools. Tempo's making great strides in this area. Really looking forward to some of the work they have on their roadmap in the next few months.
We'll have some more webinars coming up about that soon.
Yeah, we're very, very excited about it. No pressure. I'm like, I know I'm highlighting it a little bit, but we're very excited. So, and just so you can know where that excitement comes from on our end, I mean, I can consult our clients for days, but what I need at the end of the day is a platform that works and that is functional and that shows the data that our clients need. I can't control that. I can influence it. I can try, right? But at the end of the day, CatWorks doesn't make software. So we're really excited about our partnership with Tempo, about the influence that we've been able to have. It's much appreciated, and we're hoping to do some really cool things together with this decision layer. And lastly, we see this whole thing as a journey. I know that sounds like hallmarky, but it's just true. So you've got in the beginning, you've got
we need to make a Hallmark commercial for the next webinar we do together. That's
all a journey.
We'll get some real actors from the 80s and 90s to take place.
So cheesy. We can't. We try to not fall into the corporate jargon, but it just pulls us in. And so we've got a cloud migration. Most of the technology, I'm sure you're all sick of hearing this, but it's just true. I mean, most of the more robust modern technology is happening in the cloud. So a good amount of our client base, step 1 is get in the cloud. Step 2, really, as we go through this, it fits the agenda we had today for the most part, right? So step 2 is that operational data architecture. This is where should the data live? What systems do you have and what data do they hold? If you have, work management happening across Asana, Monday, Jira Software, is that intentional? Like or is that hurting your business? Often that can be not great. Okay. And I say that as somebody that obviously, we'd prefer Jira software. I'm a little bit biased. But in general,
I imagine most of our attendees are as well. So you're going to see.
Yeah. As a consultant, like outside of any eco, it's really just having a centralized work management platform. And if Monday.com is the one for you, okay. But I think the consultant part of me is saying just don't have more than, don't have that sprawl, right? Whatever your choice is. And so data normalization, this is the conversation we had about, okay, maybe the data sits there, but is it too much? Is it not enough? Is it the right, what your organization's asking for, your leadership? You then move to strategic portfolio management. That's really the topic, SPM, of this webinar. And this is where we get very tool focused. There's a lot of portfolio management tools out there, and there's been a lot for a while. The ones that we're really connecting ourselves to at this point are the ones that understand data volume and the need for artificial intelligence, not just the need for it within the platform, but the need to track it as part of a portfolio that a client is using. So that's really what we're, as a consulting firm, what we're prioritizing.
One of the quick anecdote there. One of the topics of interest that came up a lot when we were at Team is Uber had announced the week before that they'd spent their entire AI budget by April, and it was like $3.4 billion or something. And when they admitted later, they were like, we don't know what value this produced. There's just the token maxing the token maxing meme became the way it was used, right? They were like ranking developers by usage of AI, which makes sense in some regards. Of the more you use something, the more you're going to learn it. Like if it was thought of as an investment, we're going all in from an educational perspective, that's great. But what did that actually deliver for our customers? Right? That's sort of, I didn't talk about it too much here, but kind of like one of the Tempo workforce intelligence platform is tracking the spend of AI as it commits to your initiatives. So, did this do something for us? Right? And making it very tangible, not just, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on that.
No, that was the best way to cut me off, because that I think this, Patrick, and I know others at Tempo, CatWorks is very, very excited about that platform for the reason that AI is not only something that your tools use, but it's part of how you execute your portfolio. So we're going to come in there and we're going to get you clarity on how your people are mobilized, but can't give you clarity on how your AI is mobilized. We're missing half of it. And so this is really very important and very exciting, and we're looking forward to what you all do there. And as in closing for this document, the last piece that we're really pulling for or pushing for is decision intelligence. While I could speak for days, we talk about AI. We talk about AI when it comes to efficiencies, or we talk about AI when it comes to, supplementary staff. And those conversations are relevant. I'm not trying to diminish them. But if that's all we do when in the conversation of AI, if we talk about how to do things faster or how to supplement people, we are missing what I think is a massive opportunity to talk about making decisions at a level we were never able to make before. The human brain can only take in so much data. The human brain can only have so much foresight. Having, a collaborative AI platform that you can trust, really underline that word, one that you actually trust to help you make decisions, because it can consume far more data than our brains can, and help you see 20 steps ahead, help you reconcile that with maybe what your competitors may be doing in your field. This is where I think the true value lies. And this is where CatWorks is choosing to put our energy, is towards this type of AI enablement. Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, we did it with 4 minutes to spare. Go team, go. So I think we got all the questions. There was one question we didn't answer. We'll answer that one in a follow-up because it was a little deeper. And so I'll wrap us up here. In the poll, if you haven't answered it yet, basically the questions are, do you need some help? it'll give us ways to reach out to you to provide some enable, whether that's from the CatWorks team or from the Tempo team or both, right? We work together a lot. We had a call together yesterday with a prospect to try to help solve some really critical problems for them. So
we did.
And it was fun. It was nice to nerd out. So thank you, Lindsey. Really appreciate your time, your expertise, dare I say wisdom. And do you have any closing thoughts or anything for our attendees?
I'd say I just extend the thank you right back. It's always great to nerd out with you, Patrick. And I sincerely hope some of this landed. As Patrick mentioned, there'll be ways to reach out to us. We're always here for a conversation, just to at least, figure out or detail what you have going on within your neck of the woods, and where either Tempo or CatWorks can help facilitate that. But thank you, Patrick. This topic is, I think, crazy important, and it's always something I really enjoy talking about. And your expertise is great to have in a back and forth conversation. So great working with you.
Go team, go.
Yes.
All right. Well, cheers. Thank you, Lindsey. Thank you, attendees. Have a nice one.